Next on Unsolved Mysteries, two escaped convicts pull off a daring bank robbery in broad daylight. Who is the mastermind behind the $500,000 heist? Since he was a boy, author James Ellroy has been haunted by a real-life mystery: his mother's murder. Now, he's searching for her killer. Two women say they were deathly ill when they arrived at Lourdes, France, and they left cured. Was it a miracle? And a young boy is separated from his mother after a bitter divorce. He hasn't seen her for more than 40 years, but maybe you have. Stories of cunning, deceit, and lies. See if you can figure out who's telling the truth. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. A December day in Gainesville, Florida, 8:30 a.m.
Nobody move! Just put your hands up and no one will get hurt.
Two men wearing Ronald Reagan masks pull up a bank. In less than 5 minutes, they make off with nearly $500,000. To the FBI, the MO was familiar. It seemed to be the handiwork of a man named Patrick Michael Mitchell, alias Richard Joseph Landry, alias Michael Garrison, alias Roger Lanthorn. By any name, he's one of the most skilled bank robbers in the country. Patrick Michael Mitchell isn't just a bank robber. He's also a master of disguise. At every one of his heists, he wears a different comic mask. But the FBI isn't laughing. Mitchell has already bagged some $3 million in cash.
I guess you could best describe him as being confident. He's even vain to a certain extent. We believe him to have taken the prescription drug Retin A, which supposedly keeps your youthful appearance. He's been described as having an athletic build. He likes the ladies. He fancies himself as a gourmet cook. Matter of fact, we've even recovered some cookbooks from the trunk of one of his cars. So far, we've developed at least 25 different aliases he's used in the past 11 years.
18 months before the Gainesville, Florida heist, Mitchell had been serving 20 years for bank robbery. 3 years into his sentence, he and two other prisoners staged a bold escape. Mitchell was the mastermind. None of the guards noticed that the three men were missing. No alarms were set off. They changed into street clothes, hid in a utility room, and then simply walked outside. The girlfriend of one of the prisoners was waiting for them. She had been fooled into believing that the men were out on a weekend pass. The escape went off without a hitch. One of the convicts was later captured in Atlanta, Georgia. But Mitchell and the third escapee, Johnny Salazar Stewart, headed for Gainesville, Florida.
They come into a town a month or two in advance, stay at local hotels and motels.
The way I see it, armored car gets there between 8:15 and 8:20.
By staking out department stores or armored car services, they then determine when and where they will make their hit.
Mitchell and Stewart begin planning their next robbery. They rented a self-storage unit with a clear view of both the bank they wanted to rob and the armored car company that served the bank. Mitchell pretended to load and unload boxes from the storage unit while he watched the movements of the armored cars. He never went inside the bank. Instead, he sent Stewart to scout the interior.
This individual, after they open an account, has a legitimate reason for being in the bank. He can be there when deliveries are made by the Armored Car Services, where he can see actually what they're doing and how they're doing it after the deliveries are made.
7:30 a.m., the day of the robbery. Mitchell and Stewart meet at the self-storage facility.
Good morning.
It is now 20 minutes later. The bank employees begin to arrive. The bank will open in an hour and 10 minutes. 8 a.m. The armored car leaves to pick up deposits from several stores in the area.
I've got a bomb planted, and it's ready to go off.
8:10. The Gainesville police receive a bomb threat. The target is a junior high school in the same police district as the bank.
Hello.
8:22. The armored car guards arrive at the bank with the morning's cash deposits. At the same time, patrol cars are dispatched to the site of the bomb threat, 32 blocks from the bank. Police believe that it was Mitchell who phoned in the false alarm to divert them. At 8:25, the robbers make their move.
Don't anybody move! Put your hands up and no one will get hurt.
I remembered laying on the floor in the back. I kept thinking, I'll never see my husband or my children again. I remember thinking that he was going to shoot me in the back.
Keep your hands up!
I was thinking he's either going to shoot somebody or he's going to take someone hostage. I was very frightened.
This is a bomb. Nobody move, and it won't go off.
On the way out, Mitchell drops a bag containing $28,000. Still, the take is nearly $500,000. As for the bomb, it proves to be a fake, designed to buy the robbers more time to escape. 8:40 a.m. A woman who works at the storage facility sees Mitchell drive away. It is the last sighting of Patrick Michael Mitchell in Gainesville. 2 months later, Johnny Stewart is apprehended. He is convicted for his role in the robbery and for the escape. He will be eligible for parole in 2026. A year after the robbery, Mitchell's Cadillac is found in a storage facility in Tallahassee, 150 miles from Gainesville. The car has been wiped clean, but Mitchell has left behind 9 cookbooks in the back seat.
I think it's imperative that we find Patrick Michael Mitchell because I don't believe that he'll be stopping with the Gainesville robbery. Based on his previous activities in the past 11 years and his hit frequency, it's not if he's going to hit, but when he's going to hit.
Update. The long criminal career of Patrick Michael Mitchell came to an end when he was arrested walking out of a bank he had just robbed in South Haven, Mississippi. Mitchell pleaded guilty to 2 robbery charges and received 2 30-year sentences, plus 5 years for the escape. Mitchell died of lung cancer while still in prison. He was 64 years old. Next, James Ellroy's novels about crime top the bestseller lists. But he remains obsessed with a real-life killing, the unsolved murder of his own mother. Los Angeles, California.
He knew the area, and he knew that access road. It was dark and quiet and semi-secluded. It probably went bad right then, right there. He was living in that split second that separates lust from rage. He was thinking about sex. He probably wasn't thinking about murder.
These are the words of novelist James Ellroy. His dark tales of sexual obsession and violence often top the bestseller list. But not everyone knows how much truth there is just below the surface of his stories.
The spark point could have been words or a simple gesture. The combustion occurred. It flared out of control. He hit her and hit her and hit her and strangled her.
When James was only 10 years old, his mother was beaten, raped, and strangled. Her partially clothed body was left in a bed of ivy. A strand of her pearls lay scattered in the street.
My mother's crime scene to me is all crime scenes. The crime scene to me it's primal. It's almost Oedipal. The moment of the discovery of her body is in many ways the moment of my birth, because it's the genesis of my detectives' obsessions with the murders that they ultimately become consumed by.
Like a character in one of his books, James Ellroy is obsessed with tracking down a killer. Ellroy hopes that an eyewitness known as the Blonde Woman will come forward and identify the man who killed his mother.
James, I'm home!
Jean Ellroy, divorced, early 40s, was a staff nurse at a Los Angeles factory and lived close by in the town of El Monte. Jean had custody of her 10-year-old son, James, during the week.
There you are. How was school today? Okay.
Every Saturday, James would take the bus to stay with his father. Sundays, he would return by cab. The schedule ran like clockwork until the afternoon of June 22nd, 1958.
The yard was full of policemen in uniforms and plainclothesmen. I wasn't afraid, but I was anxious. I was apprehensive.
Are you James Ellroy?
Yeah.
Son, your mother's been killed. Where's your father?
What?
People were surprised that I wasn't more overtly emotional right after I got the news that my mother had been murdered. I think they expected me to cry or carry on or display some kind of overt histrionics. But I took the news internally.
This picture of James was taken by a press photographer on that same day.
After my mother's murder, all I wanted to read were crime novels, true crime books, anything pertaining to violent crime and psychosexual aberrance. At age 17, my father died. I was no choir boy before that time, but boy, oh boy, things got worse. I drank, used drugs, broke into houses and stole things, drove around in stolen cars, shoplifted, and did spurts of county jail time from 1965 to 1977. My life was going nowhere, and I wanted a real life. I hadn't been with a woman in years, and I wanted to write. I wanted to write dark, evil, perverted, powerful, compelling crime fiction. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do it as long as I drank and used drugs.
James' first novel was published in 1982. More than a dozen followed, the writing fueled by his mother's rape and murder. It bubbled to the surface in The Black Dahlia, his take on the 1947 slaying of Elizabeth Short, one of the most infamous unsolved murders of the 20th century. The book was dedicated to his mother.
It's as if Elizabeth Short became my stand-in for my mother. I wanted to feel the horror of my mother's death, and I used Elizabeth Short as a substitute.
7 years after the book was published, James was ready for the real thing. The LA County Sheriff's Department arranged for him to examine the official case file of his mother's murder.
First of all is the sheriff's, what we call, murder book. This was the first time I'd ever been asked by a member of the family of the victim to actually see the crime scene photographs. And I was very hesitant to show those to him because they're very graphic, and so I warned him. And if you wish, I'll go through there and pull out the ones that I think you may not want to see.
No, thank you. I'd like to see them all.
Okay.
Physical evidence from the murder had been stored in a paper bag, locked away for more than 30 years.
piece of evidence to show.
James held the nylon stocking used to strangle his mother, and he touched her silk dress.
I started sweating. I started shaking. It was locked down, revved in, right on the edge of shell shock. Truly an awe-inspiring moment.
And then a face stared back at him from the file. The suspected killer. This man had dark hair and an olive complexion, and he became known as the Swarthy Man. Several eyewitnesses saw him with Jean Elroy just hours before she was killed.
I'll be right with you.
Around 10 p.m., Jean and the Swarthy Man pulled into a local drive-in. With Detective Stoner's help, Elroy tracked down the waitress who served the couple.
Do you like a menu tonight?
She had on this beautiful dress, pearls around her neck. Her hair was done beautifully. That's what made me remember her so well, because she was a beautiful woman, and then she had this dress on that I had one like. I mean, she looked very prim and proper. She was very pleasant.
And anything for you, sir?
Just coffee.
He had no accent. He didn't talk with any, even a southern drawl. He just talked very normally, like you'd expect an average Californian to talk.
Jean and the Swarthy Man were next seen at a bar called the Desert Inn. They were with a blonde woman. No one knows her name or how she fit into the evening's plans, but she seemed to know both Jean and the suspect, and she left the bar with them around midnight. At 2:15 a.m., Jean and the suspect returned to the drive-in. The blonde woman was no longer with them.
This time, she was not as neat and prim as she was when I waited on her the first time. She looked like she'd been necking her, fooling around some, because her dress and her hair was kind of messed up. But they didn't seem overly friendly together.
Okay, and for you.
And he wasn't saying anything. He was just too quiet.
Coffee.
Just before 3 a.m., they drove off.
I think the Swarthy Man decided that the evening wasn't over for him. He either knew about a secluded location or came upon it and stopped and forced himself on Mrs. Elroy.
Listen, I had a good time. Just take me home.
I bought you drinks. I bought you dinner. You owe me.
I don't owe you anything!
If the Swarthy Man is alive, I would like to bring him to justice. If we identify the man and learn that he's dead, I want to go back and trace this man's roots back to his crib to find out why this event happened.
Though not a suspect, authorities consider the unidentified blonde woman an important material witness in this case. Jean Elroy's former co-workers at Airtech Dynamics in Los Angeles may also have information about the identity of the suspect.
The blonde woman knows who killed my mother. The blonde woman knows the identity of the Swarthy Man. The blonde has told people. There are people out there who know elements of this case, who know names, who've heard the story, and it's just a question of tapping into those people.
If you have any information about the murder of Jean Elroy, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, two women claim they've been cured by the waters of Lourdes and that their cure was a miracle. Lourdes, France. It's a sacred spot that draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. The story of Lourdes began more than a century ago with a 14-year-old girl named Bernadette Soubirous. On February 11, 1858, Bernadette claimed that in a grotto just outside of town, she experienced a beautiful vision. A woman dressed in blue and white. At the woman's command, Bernadette began to dig and uncovered a spring. Many believed that Bernadette's vision was the Blessed Virgin Mary and the spring a source of divine healing.
Nobody is obliged to believe in Lourdes, but I think when you really look and examine all the facts, all the words, all the gestures that surround all these events that took place in 1858, I think it's very difficult really not to be moved by it in some way.
In 1933, the Vatican declared Bernadette a saint, and a church was built over the spring. Through the years, Lourdes developed a reputation for healing both the spirit and the body. Today, people from all over the world travel to Lourdes hoping to be cured. The Catholic Church has documented 68 such miracles. Among them is the case of a French woman named Jeanne Fratelli.
Le Seigneur fit pour moi des merveilles.
The Lord did marvelous things for me.
Je ne suis pas ici pour vous dire.
I am not here to tell you to believe.
Je suis ici pour vous dire.
I am here to tell you what happened to me. And believe me, it is a strange adventure.
In 1937, when Jeanne was 23, her abdomen grew rock hard and painful to the touch.
No.
Blood seeped from her nose, mouth, and intestines.
La dernière température, c'était quoi? Doucement. Respirez doucement.
Affreux comme maladie.
It was a terrible illness. It was a constant trial. When the doctor says, there is nothing I can do for you, you just have to wait patiently for death.
Jeanne had 13 operations over 11 years, but nothing helped. Eventually, she was diagnosed with tubercular peritonitis. There is no known cure. On 4 different occasions, her priest administered last rites. Finally, 2 of Jeanne's friends insisted on taking her to Lourdes. Her doctor was so sure that she would not survive the trip that he told her friends to take along a coffin. When Jeanne arrived at Lourdes, she had been virtually comatose for 3 months. She was immediately taken to the church. One of the priests who served Mass that day, Father Albert Rock, remembers her clearly.
Arrivant devant Jeanne, je me suis posé la
When I approached Jeanne, I asked myself, would she be able to take Holy Communion or would she vomit the host?
Father Rock tried to place a tiny piece of the wafer between Jeanne's lips. One of Jeanne's friends had to help.
Corpus Christi.
I closed her mouth myself. And she instantly opened her eyes. And she looked at me and asked, where am I?
C'est à l'euro de mon enfant. Instantanément.
I repeat, instantly. The moment I pushed her chin up and her lips met, she came out of the coma she had been in during July, August, September, and October.
Jeanne was moved into the grotto itself, to the very spot where Saint Bernadette saw the Blessed Mother. Jeanne says something extraordinary happened.
I had the feeling that somebody was taking me under the arms to sit me up. And I turned around to see who it was that helped me and thanked them. I had that feeling again. This time, that 2 invisible hands were taking my 2 hands and putting them on my stomach. I was instantly and permanently cured.
Seigneur a dit dans l'Évangile.
The Lord says, ask and you shall receive. But I never ask.
Je n'ai jamais demandé.
I received without asking.
Jeanne stood up for the first time in years. She was taken to bathe in the water from St. Bernadette's spring. The next day, she was examined by a group of doctors.
Non, non, merci. Je peux me débrouiller toute seule.
Virtually every one of Jeanne's symptoms had disappeared. She returned to her own city and her own doctor, the same doctor who didn't expect her to survive the trip. A professed atheist, the doctor was amazed.
And it was then he said, I do not believe in miracles, yet I have to believe because you should be in your grave today.
After more than 11 years of illness, Jeanne was finally able to live a normal life. In 1950, she took vows to become a Benedictine nun. The church referred Jeanne's case to the National Medical Committee of Paris, a review board made up of both believers and non-believers.
A very rigorous comparison was made between her medical status before the illness and her medical status after the illness. The Medical Bureau's findings were then to say, in our eyes, this, according to science, is just inexplicable. They then passed on these findings to the church.
The Catholic Church officially declared Jeanne's cure a miracle.
Si on y croit, tant mieux.
If you believe in it, good for you. If you do not believe in it, too bad, it is true. I tell about my healing 50, 100 times a day. It matters not. Everything is for the Lord, without a doubt. I accept everything with joy.
Next, our story continues with an American woman who tells of her amazing recovery after bathing in the waters of Lourdes. For thousands of believers, the waters at Lourdes, France have undeniable healing powers. One of those believers is Lorraine Hendricks.
Inhale. Good, now exhale.
When Lorraine was only 14 years old, she came down with a mysterious illness that her doctors could not diagnose. She can barely hold her head up. Her eyes rolled involuntarily, and she could not keep food down.
It was very frightening. Every day you went to the hospital and you saw this child and you saw her getting weaker and sicker, and there was no answers. They couldn't give her medication because they didn't know what to give her.
You can see the color in her eyes leaving. You can see her color is changing. You can see the weakness getting worse, and there's nothing you can do.
When all else failed, a psychiatrist examined Lorraine. He too was at a loss. Finally, a friend of Lorraine's parents suggests that they take her to Lourdes.
Lorraine made the trip with her parents and grandmother. According to Lorraine's parents, her kidneys had begun to fail, and the stress of the trip left her weaker than ever.
She kept saying, "Please, Mommy." I felt I was doing something to this child, and I should have stayed in the States. What was I doing here in a strange country? I couldn't speak the language. And she's so deathly sick.
Okay, she can rest here.
An American volunteer was asked to stay with the family. The volunteers suggested that Lorraine's family take some time alone, while Lorraine waited to visit the waters.
You look tired. Why don't you go for a walk or take a rest or something?
No. This family absolutely needed some help. And what I did was to try to be as calm as I could, to allow the parents to have some time to be away, just so that everyone would have a breathing space, because they seemed to be a family that was just in absolute crisis when they arrived.
I think at that point, death looked like a welcome relief to me. I would have accepted it, and I guess I felt it was very near.
I'll be right here, okay?
As she drifted in and out of sleep, Lorraine had a vivid dream that made her feel that everything would be all right.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. In verdant pastures, he gives me repose.
Within seconds, next thing you knew, I was standing next to my body, and I was walking with a beautiful woman. I don't know who it was. I just remember we were walking, we were about 4 or 5 feet above the ground. I remember her saying to me, "You must go back now." And I said, I don't want to go back. That body is dying. And she said, "Yes, you must go back to prove to others he still exists today." And I opened up my eyes, and my mom was standing over me, and we proceeded to get ready to go down to the baths at that time.
Lorraine was so ill that a complete immersion in the water seemed out of the question. Even though church officials say it never happens, Lorraine recalls that the attendants poured water over her head.
Pray for our sinners now and at the hour.
I tried to do everything I could while she was sick. I did the fasting and the prayers and everything.
Saint Bernadette.
I could actually physically feel a release within myself in my chest area that I didn't even know the tightness existed until that moment. When she was through with the bath and came out, she looked exactly the same. There was no change.
I did not expect that she would be healed or cured. I expected that perhaps her family would receive some consolation, that perhaps they would receive strength to make it through whatever they had to go through.
God bless you. God bless you.
That evening, Lorraine's grandmother spent the night in Lorraine's room.
I never stirred. I never moved. And I was asleep before you know it. And then it was about 5 hours later, I woke up, 11 o'clock at night, and I was starving, absolutely hungry. I didn't have any pain. I just felt like, I felt terrific. I could fly if I needed to. I got up out of bed, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was me again. I was whole, I was 100%. I just, oh God, it was all I could do for them to contain me. Her eyes, they were beautiful. The color was in the face. She had rosy cheeks, and she was so energetic and full of life. You knew that she was touched. You stood there and you were witnessing what God just did. I remember sitting out the window. It was about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, listening to the church that's local there chiming every hour, and just feeling so glad to be alive and to be healthy, and everything was just great. I couldn't believe I was that blessed.
The church is very cautious about declaring an apparent cure or recovery to be an actual miracle.
We don't doubt her sincerity, but she never underwent any medical investigation after the healing. And so there would always remain in the minds of the doctors and of the church a certain kind of doubt. We appreciate that Lorraine believes that she has truly been touched by God, but we can't give to her situation the same qualification that we give to Jeanne Fratello in recognizing the case of Jeanne Fratello as indeed a miracle.
I believe that I was healed at Lourdes and that it is a miracle. I believe with every ounce within me, Lourdes is a part of me now. It is my life, and there is no doubt whatsoever that I was touched and that I was healed.
What really happens at places like Lourdes? If someone arrives deathly ill and leaves with no trace of sickness, perhaps it doesn't really matter whether or not we call it a miracle. Next, a man searches for the mother he was forced to leave when he was just 4 years old. Vancouver, British Columbia. In March of 1949, Annie Curry, an English war bride, said goodbye to her 2 little boys. She and her husband, Donald, were getting divorced. Donald had been given custody of both sons, Daryl, 3 years old, and Jen, 5. Now adults, they haven't seen their mother for over 50 years.
I was never given the sense that I could say how much I missed her, that I could ask questions about where's my mom. She's a big question mark, and I would like to hear her voice. I would like to hear what she has to say about her life. I'd like her to know me.
Jim Curry is a lot like most people searching for a lost parent, but there is one unusual twist to this story. Jim has spent most of his life looking for other people's parents as well. Jim is a senior investigator for a California Public Defender's Office, an advocate for defendants who may be facing the death penalty.
How you doing? I've had adopted defendants before and had to find their mothers, and I've been very successful in doing that. It just is very ironic to me that I can find so much about these people's history and I can't complete my own. It's very frustrating.
Jim's parents met in 1943 during World War II. Donald Curry was 23, a Canadian sergeant serving in England. Annie Fry was a 19-year-old country girl from Wales. The two fell in love and were married that same year. In 1944, London was being bombed by the Nazis. Annie was pregnant when a bomb blast knocked her to the ground. She miscarried. When Annie became pregnant again, Donald sent her to live with his parents in Vancouver. Jim was born on December 20th, 1944. At the time, Donald was still stationed in England.
She's in a foreign country. She doesn't know anybody except for my dad's immediate family. She makes the best adjustment she can, but it's a lonely kind of existence for her, and I think fraught with a lot of fear, you know, that whether or not my dad was going to make it home.
In June of 1945, the war in Europe was finally over. After more than a year of separation from his wife, Donald came home.
Annie! I missed you.
Donald, it's Jimmy. That's your son. Jimmy, this is Daddy.
It was a moment of joy, but it was short-lived. The war had changed Donald Curry forever.
It was a very traumatic experience for my father. He thought war was wrong. He told me once that you'll never know how much it can change you when you see your closest friends blown into 1,000 pieces in front of your eyes and you can do nothing about it. I think he lost a lot of faith. He closed down emotionally to protect himself.
In 1945, a second son, Daryl, was born. Donald got a job working nights as a customs official. Annie was left alone, and she began spending time with one of her neighbors, a much older, married man. The friendship turned into an affair. A relative broke the news to Donald, and he sued Annie for divorce and for custody of the boys.
I believe the petitioner, Mr. Curry, implicitly. He is a clean, wholesome individual with a fine war record. I hereby grant a decree in his favor against Anne Ellen Curry.
My understanding of the judgment against my mother was that my dad was to have sole custody of both children, and she was to have no visitation rights. It would be up to my father whether or not she would be allowed to see the children.
Mr. Curry, you must realize that there is more good than evil in this girl. So do not burn your bridges. She has been a clean and decent girl until she met the correspondent.
The judge's decree doesn't indicate hostility toward her. It indicates that even there may be something worth salvaging, that she was under the blandishments of an older, more sophisticated man. In spite of all the negatives I've heard, and on the surface it being a very nasty divorce, there was still something that came through for the judge. This was basically a good person.
With the divorce final, Donald made some hard choices. He put his son Daryl up for adoption.
There was a sense in me at the time that it was the last time I would see her.
He needs his brother. He needs me. Look at him.
I don't have to. I know what he feels.
Despite Annie's pleas, Donald did not bend.
I don't remember any hugging. I don't remember any arguing, but I do remember it being sad.
Donald then moved to Los Angeles with Jim. Donald married twice. Although both stepmothers were kind to Jim, he still longed for the mother that he barely remembered.
My dad was always very reticent to talk about his early life, and my mother in particular. Anything that would lead my dad to believe that I wanted to find her was very upsetting to him.
After his father's death, Jim began to search for his mother. He never found her, but he did wind up finding his brother Daryl. He and Jim have been reunited, but Daryl has no memory of his mother or father.
There's an unconditional love that a mother has for her son, and I feel that that was pulled away from me. I don't think I'd have to say a word to her for hours if I met her. I don't think I'd have to say anything.
Annie Curry is 5'2". She has a medium build and may speak with a British accent. This enhanced photo shows how she might look today. Annie's last name may now be McDonald from a second marriage. If you have any idea where she might be, please log on to our website at unsolved.com.